All right, we got 10 games tonight. Line there, 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 and all gridded off. Somebody can get confused about who's playing who. The home teams are on the bottom. Uh, well, yeah, let's do this right. So, if we're going to talk about tonight's games, let's start with Jersey and the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, Jersey is the underdog story of, I think, of the year, other than that expansion team that hasn't been an expansion team. Columbus has been an example of a team that's just, stayed about where they were last year, if not got better. Schneider's the starter. Bobrovsky is probable for Columbus. Um, this is a big test for New Jersey. New Jersey's got 34 points. Columbus has 35. A win, they bounce past Columbus, and it becomes an even bigger story. And believe me, this story will continue to grow if I don't know. I'm surprised that so many young players have come together for Jersey, and they remind me a lot of Toronto last year, where there was all kinds of kids, and people were like, well, this Matthews kid will help, but there's so much youth and inexperience, it's going to be baby steps, and then boom, Toronto's in a playoff spot. New Jersey reminds me a lot of that, but they didn't have the bad start. Toronto had the iffy start. This team could get even more dangerous as time goes on. It depends on if those rookies hit the wall at about the 50 game mark, as a lot of rookies do. But rookies this day and age are better. They have better conditioning. They seem to be more mentally prepared for the grind on the road. Yeah, I'm done ruling Jersey out. The Rangers in Pittsburgh. So this is a feud that is one that goes back 50 years. Pittsburgh 15-10-3. Now, the interesting part is that the Rangers had the rough start, and now their record is much better. We can almost forget about that rough start, right? Lundqvist is in net. I'd be very surprised if Jarry isn't playing for Pittsburgh. 15-10-3 Pittsburgh, 14-10-2 Rangers. Let's go. Let's see which team is the better team. Sidney Crosby's playing a lot better. And I don't care if they spoon-fed him 5-on-3 goals against Tampa. The fact is that getting goals gets that weight off your mind. You start not worrying so much about your stats and just playing your game. And that's what it is for Crosby. Now, St. Louis and Montreal. This is the first big challenge for Montreal. Now, they won the game against Columbus. I'm not saying Columbus wasn't a big challenge. But after the back-to-back against Detroit, they now get to play St. Louis, which is going to be a much better team than Detroit. Now, here's the weird part. It's Allen and Price. A month ago, we would have said, well, Allen's the better goaltender. Right now, it's Price, and it's not close. Carey Price has turned around an embarrassing start, and he's a couple more wins away from having stats of 9-10 save percentage, good goals against average, and then, again, much like the Rangers' slow start, we forget all about it. Carey Price had that rough patch in the middle of last year. We forget all about that, too. He's still one of, if not the best goalie in the league. Again, it depends on how you define the best goalie. If you're saying, well, he has to be consistent all year long, then it's not Price. But if it's a guy that you say for periods of time, man, this guy is absolutely lights out, it is Carey Price. So it just depends on how you view it. For me, he's one of the best. So again, it depends on how you define things. I do think that the Blues are the better team. I mean, the offense, the Blues are great. The defense, the Blues are great. But they come in on somewhat of they haven't been as great over the last couple weeks as they were before. And it's because you set that bar so high. And again, you get into these kind of soft spots in the schedule where maybe your team lags a little bit. Happens to everybody. Winnipeg and Detroit. Winnipeg's playing really well. Detroit isn't. Detroit has been horrible. The combined losses against Montreal are beyond embarrassing. They are abysmal by any level. I would expect Detroit to come back big time tonight. If you want an upset of the night, I would not be surprised if Detroit does it, simply because their pride had to have been wounded by those back-to-back losses to Montreal. They They're going to see a team coming in Winnipeg that is on the verge of being number one overall, that is so close to number one overall, and they're going to say, you know what, tonight's the night, and maybe they go out and do that. It's Howard and Hellebuck. Howard is capable of having these games, these 35 save shutout type games. I could see it. Is it going to happen? Probably not. But Detroit's got more pride than you might think, considering the long losing streak they've been on. And there are a lot of things wrong in Detroit. I've talked about it over and over again. I talked about it before the season even started. There are issues with Detroit with the cap, with certain contracts being a little high, with older players being brought in that don't suit the team if they're going into a rebuild. You name it. Winnipeg is the model right now for franchises. The problem is that model involves not being very good for a long period of time, stockpiling all kinds of young prospects. They all come in, and you look at Winnipeg, they have a young, dynamic, high-scoring team. Their defense is better than it's been given credit for in the past, and Hellebuck has turned his career around. It's a feel-good story all around, but for tonight, against Detroit, I would expect a very difficult Detroit team to play against. The Islanders and Tampa. So these are two of the top teams in the East, and the surprise team is the Islanders, and I don't qualify them as a surprise team being Tampa. Some people are surprised. Most of us aren't, that looked at that roster and said, holy crap, look what they can put together. Splitting up Stamkos and Kucherov has worked. I would expect them to be back together at some point during the season. But for tonight, the Islanders are coming off of a win last night over Florida. It was a shootout win. It was, from what I saw in the highlights, it looked like it was a bit of a sloppy game. And I would expect this to be a win for Tampa because it is a back-to-back. And Tampa is, I believe, the better team. So I'll let people say whatever about that. But that's how I feel anyways. The Islanders have definitely fallen back over the last week, but I still do view them as one of the better teams in the East. I still do think that once the playoffs roll around, they'll be right there, and I think they'll surprise people by the fact that they're in. Tampa and the Islanders are the two teams that went on nice long runs at the end of the year and just failed to make it. Just failed to get that number 8 spot that was picked up by the Leafs. So it's easy to look at these two teams coming into this season and say, well, they both missed. But when you look at how they finished last year and the lineup they can put together, you've got Stamkos wanting to prove that he's, healthy and ready to go. He's now the number 1 scorer in the NHL. And you've got John Tavares going into contract negotiations because he's a UFA at the end of this year. And he's having a great season. It is not going to be cheap for the Islanders to keep him if they can. And then there's this Bailey kid who's also putting up a ton of points, and he's a free agent pretty quick here. Also worth mentioning is Anders Lee is really close to a 50-goal pace. He's close enough that I'll say, yeah, he could score 50. He has been potting more goals than he did last year, and last year was kind of considered to be his high. A lot of people are like, okay, well, this is probably his ceiling. Nope. He's proving that's not true. Nashville and Dallas. So last night, Nashville does away with Boston. So any upward momentum Boston had dies for that one night anyways. They now look to do the same thing to one of the other teams I cheer for, Dallas. They're going into Dallas. Rene's probably starting, according to the website I looked at. I'm guessing Saros. I'd be very surprised if Saros doesn't start tonight. It's a back-to-back. Bishop is in net for Dallas. That's been confirmed. Saros doesn't have good stats, so that makes it look like Dallas can jump on him. But Saros is a good goaltender. I'm waiting for that bounce back for him. So seeing Saros in net, my guess is you'll see one bad goal against him because he seems to allow that one bad goal per game. But I expect a good game from Saros if he's the goaltender, and I expect a close game between these two. Dallas is bound and determined to prove they're a contender, and Nashville's bound and determined to prove they're number 1. We'll see how it works here. Nashville's got to keep up with teams like St. Louis and Winnipeg. So I would watch for all 3 teams to be scoreboard watching and not admitting it. I've heard players before, always Players that are playing for a team will say we don't watch the scoreboard. But once they're retired or once the season's over, they're like, yeah, we paid attention. These three teams have got to be paying attention to what the other ones are doing. They have to be paying attention. And for Dallas, they're getting into that conversation. Look, 17 wins, 17 wins, 17 wins, 16. They can win tonight. If St. Louis and Winnipeg both lose their games, then it's a 4-horse race all of a sudden. If Dallas loses and both of these teams win, it's still possible, but tonight would definitely get them right into that running. So, who knows? Maybe, fingers crossed. But again, it's not a matter of me not cheering for teams as much as it's a matter of I'm used to teams I cheer for not necessarily doing well. That's just reality. Vegas and Anaheim. So in this one, you've got the surprisingly second place Vegas Golden Knights against the surprisingly, if you don't look at their injury list, the surprisingly lowly ranked Anaheim Ducks. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Ducks win this game. The Ducks have a lot more going for them than I think. Forward decimation is necessarily going to take out. I like their defense crew, and I like Gibson. The issue is going to be again tonight, and I'll watch this. How many shots are Anaheim going to allow? The other thing I noticed too, this is kind of funny. If a team wins, the team that loses outshoots them almost 2-1. Fans will point that out, and yet when I point out how many shots a goalie faces, people will usually say, yeah, but that goalie faced a lot of shots, but how many of them were quality shots? It's just this weird thing I've noticed. If I argue shots against matter, people say, well, you got to look at quality. And if I just look at a score and I go, well, this team won, then people go, well, wait a minute, they were outshot. It's so weird. it's like, wait, no, it's both ways. Okay, the shots matter because they don't. That's the way I'm going to look at it from now on. So because shots don't matter, and they do, watch for Anaheim's defense and see if they can allow less than 30 shots. If they can limit Vegas to below 30 shots, especially since Vegas' shooting percentage is very good, I would watch for Anaheim to possibly eke out a win. If Vegas gets more than 30 shots, I would expect Anaheim to struggle tonight because Vegas is very adept with the puck. They've got more scoring forwards than I think any of us realized. Carlson's one that really stands out, that he hadn't shown signs that he was going to be this good offensively. Vegas can really write their own story here, and especially at home. Vegas has only lost twice at home all year. They're deadly at home. So Anaheim just has to limit shots, keep the fans out of it, keep the emotion out of it, and they have a shot. If they can't, they're done. Minnesota and LA. The Los Angeles Kings, who've had a nice run going for them for the last few weeks, against Minnesota, a team that's also had, I think they've got 7 wins in their last 11. So Minnesota's there. The problem is they're in the Central, so they're buried. The Central is just, I keep saying it, it's just so insanely tough from top to bottom. So even though Minnesota's getting better, coming into tonight, if they lose this one, depending on what happens with the other teams in their division, it does make them look like, well, maybe Minnesota will be sellers at the deadline. I'm sure that conversation's happening somewhere. Some message board somewhere, people are like, oh, you should just sell. Dubnyk's probable starter. Jonathan Quick's been confirmed for the Kings. Quick's fantastic. The best part for the Kings is Darcy Kemper's been fantastic when he's been called upon as well. So LA genuinely has a 1-2 punch that I think is the best they've had in really quite some time. You can look at last year with Quick and Bishop, but that didn't really work. Bishop doesn't work as a backup, so it just felt awkward. And it didn't buoy the team as much as I thought it would. I thought when Quick came back, well, they'll just go on a huge run and they'll make the playoffs, and it didn't really happen. So tonight's Quick, likely Dubnyk. That's a good matchup, and we'll see who wins that one. Buffalo's in Colorado. So in the Nikita Zadorov Cup, the Buffalo Sabres, with 6 wins all season, come in against the Colorado Avalanche, who have 12 wins this season. It's worthy of note that Colorado has twice the wins of Buffalo, because coming into this season, we would not have expected that. Leonard's starting for Buffalo. Varlamov for Colorado. Rumor has it Buffalo's already listening to calls on guys like Leonard and Johnson. I don't think Leonard goes anywhere, but I think Johnson's up for grabs if somebody wants him. They still have Olmark. As far as I know, Olmark's still in the AHL. I don't think he went back to Europe. So they can call him up for backup if they trade off Johnson. And there are teams looking for backup help. I think of Pittsburgh, for instance, could bring in Johnson for until Murray's back, depending on how long Murray would be out. Just spitballing. I just throw that out there, and then people are like, "Wait, no, that's not going to work." I didn't say it would work. I just as an example. But for Colorado, this is a must-win. You have to pot these wins. You have to see Buffalo coming in, smell blood in the water, and take them out. So in the Ryan O'Reilly Cup, we'll see who wins this one. My money personally would be on Colorado, but we'll see. There's not really a whole lot to add to that. There's just, Buffalo is 31 out of 31 on my board. I think they're 31 out of 31 in the NHL right now. I know Arizona's passed them. It's a sad story. It really is. Okie dokie. Now, Carolina and Vancouver. So again, I work tonight, so I'm not going to get to see this. This is a matchup between the team that I thought would contend for a playoff spot in the East against a team that I said was going to be a bottom feeder. The bottom feeder has maintained a relatively solid record. They haven't been as good as they were in their first 10 games. The funny part is Brock Besser has got better than he was in the first 10 games. So there's good stories going on with the Canucks, even though their record has been middling. And I say that even though they're coming off of wins over Toronto and Nashville. I give them full credit for those wins over Toronto and Nashville. This is where they've got to do their fans right by beating a Carolina team coming in that isn't great. Now, if you wanted to go to a Vancouver Canucks game, this is a good one to go to. As I said, I work. Otherwise, I'd be going to this one because tickets for this one are still available and they're cheap. And tickets for the game in January against Colorado are cheap, and that's the game I'm looking at as the next one I probably go to. But in terms of these two teams, they're both young, and they're both fun to watch. Darling is likely the starter for Carolina. Hasn't been confirmed yet. Markstrom is the starter confirmed for Vancouver. So they're both goaltenders getting their first shots at starting gigs who've had mixed results. Markstrom's coming off of a great game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but it's been mixed results in general for him, and we'll see if that continues. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And 10 games. That's a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.